Are Seat Toys about to make a name for themselves here? Well, we will discuss all that. Well, we have had a Wolverine up in here on the channel, but now it's time for the Raging Cajun. And here's a look at the box, and as you can see, a nice view of the figure and some of the accessories, and a pretty promotional pic of Gambit at the bottom of the box. Number 131. I'm presuming that's the Mafex figure number that's been replicated. And the CT logo, as well as a sign to say the figure is 6 inches. And we will do some comparisons with other action figure lines. Now, I had the Mafex Gambit, and that figure was amazing, so it will be really interesting to see how the CT Toys version is in comparison. Well, let's find out together, shall we? So sit back and grab some liquor, and let's review CT Toys Gambit. So as I mentioned, lots of information on the front of the box, while CT Toys is now avoiding using the Marvel or X-Men logos. And in the top of the box, we have some artwork with the X-Men logo and a Gambit face. Same sort of things on the sides of the box. And on the other side, some toy photography with Gambit. And on the back, all the accessories and a few poses he can get into. So the box did arrive very well, bubble wrapped, and in a black plastic bag. The box arrived a little beaten up, but that's understandable as it's come all the way from China, but I'm sure you're not interested in the box. Let's talk about the figure inside. And have you pre-ordered CT Toys Gambit? If so, have you got your copy yet? Let me know in the comments below. And if you do need any ideas how to pose him up, the packaging does give you a few ideas. As I mentioned, the Mafex copy was very poseable, and generally one of the best Mafex figures we have had in ages. And that figure is rarer than Unicorn Pooh, so it's good that CT Toys have provided us with a cheaper, more affordable version, but it's not without its flaws. But there we go. The inbox collectors will be happy now. Not there are many inbox collectors for CT Toys, I imagine. But I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Charge the cards, they go boom! So let's charge his packaging and watch it go boom and free that Raging Cajun. So welcome back to Taktak Toys. This review is not for kids, and this is how he comes out of the packaging. So the figure is displayed in a clamshell with various sets of hands. Now, one noticeable difference with Mafex and CT Toys is that the hands in the CT Toys packaging aren't on plastic U-bend supports like they are in the Mafex version. And also the Mafex version comes with cellophane on the body of the figure to protect against paint rub. Behind the figure is the clamshell with the power effects, and the stand. I never bother to use the stands, I always discard them. Discard Gambit. Gambit uses playing cards, get it? I kind of wish some toy companies would make display stands that were like little dioramas. Some ground with, say, a pipe coming out of it to hold the accessories, rather than a see-through stand which takes me out of the fantasy of world-building options around the figure. Have I explained that well? Do you know what I mean? Let me know if I made sense in the comments below. So talking of diorama themed stands to hold up figures or accessories, let's have a look at the second clamshell which holds Gambit's power effects. And just like the Mafex release, the card throwing effects for CT Toys Gambit are massive. These ones do seem like they can stand on their own a bit better than the Mafex ones, spoiler alert. But that is probably because CT Toys generally have firmer wrist joints and pegs compared to Mafex, which the Mafex Gambit has a little more trouble holding the larger accessories without the use of a stand. And talking of the stand, there it is. So it's see-through, and I'll be honest, I always just end up chucking these stands away, but if you keep them and use them, here you go. I honestly can't tell you how similar it is to the Mafex one because I can't remember. But if you can't stand anyone clam shell talk, let's open the figure up and I'll give you my first impressions. Okay, so here is CT Toys Gambit, fresh out of the packaging. And yes, he has made a name for himself, but perhaps not for the reasons you'd think. So you might be wondering, why is there a Frankenstein Parts Mafex Wolverine next to him? Well, this is a Mafex Wolverine I've had for ages. The arm broke on my copy at the elbow, and so I bought CT Toys brown and yellow suit Wolverine, and I honestly think the articulation is better on the CT Toys version. It just felt sturdier compared to my Mafex Wolverine. Anyway, here's the first constructive criticism I have for CT Toys Gambit. The neck joint is far too tightly stuck into the heads, and when you go to do a head swap, the neck peg comes out. Now, I've had this happen with Storm Collectibles figures in the past, so it's a problem I've encountered before on official figures. I should note my comparison. The Mafex Gambit can do head swaps very easily. So that's some brown points for Mafex compared to CT Toys here. So I took the head off Gambit to do a head swap, and I did heat up the peg. But I must have used pliers that were too small as the ball peg snapped. Now I have this brown and yellow suit Wolverine, so I'm going to try and use that ball peg as a replacement for Gambit, as this Wolverine is basically fodder now. But bear in mind, you will have to be extra careful with head swaps for CT Toys Gambit, or you'll face breakable like I did. Now, I was proper disappointed at this point, but spoiler alert, I did manage to make a repair. So long story short, I did Dremel out both Gambit heads, use some blue tack, and the heads fit on the neck peg. But should I really have to do that straight out of the box? Granted, it's a £20 or $20 bootleg, and things like this can happen with any action figure at times. But I think I wasn't expecting it compared to how sturdy previous CT Toys releases are, and also how easy it was to swap heads on Mafex Gambit. And I thought CT Toys Gambit was a straight-up copy of that figure. It is. But it does have some flaws. And you can see a bit of a difference between this CT Toys figure and the Mafex one. But that's because the Mafex one was so good. But there is a lot to like here. And let's do two quick comparisons. So as I mentioned, we have had a Wolverine up in here, and it's CT Toys Tiger Stripe Wolverine. Now, this is an excellent recreation of the original Mafex figure, I believe. I never had the original. And if you're a fan of the MCU, Deadpool and Wolverine movie, here's a recreation of that in Jim Lee comic form. So as you can see, Gambit scales really nicely with Wolverine from CT Toys. And we can't have Wolverine without a Deadpool, so you know what that means. Let's get a Deadpool and do a comparison. And I have never seen Sling Blade, but if it's been a while since you have seen it, here's a Marvel Legends Deadpool next to CT Toys Gambit, old Gambit nose. So as you can see here, they scale really nicely together. And as CT Toys promised, their Gambit does seem to scale as the same size as the Mafex one. So that's an absolute win for CT Toys. As one of the problems with previous CT Toys releases were that they ran shorter than the figures they were copying. It worked for Wolverine, of course, as that was part of the character's fictional height, that he was very short and stocky. Okay, mon ami, so there is some comparisons to whet your appetite. Mon cher, next thing old Gambit say. Let's take a look at some articulation. I run that number on you. Before her petite. And so the arms go out to a nice T-pose, as you can see here. It's a bit unfair for me to do any head articulation, as I've had to modify the head. And that won't be the same as the articulation you get straight out of the box. So I'll have to skip that. And as I mentioned, that is a minus point on the end score of the figure in this review. Nice butterfly joints, shoulder swivel articulation and double jointed elbows. The wrists rotate 360 degrees. And of course, same on the they side, as I mentioned. It's a very good CT Toys figure. And the articulation scheme is very good. It's just that it's a copy of an amazing Mafex figure. And the articulation on the Mafex Gambit is amazing. So CT Toys has a lot to live up to here. And I'll be honest, this is the first occasion in hand where I can notice a difference between Mafex and CT Toys in terms of quality. So A bit of a limited AB crunch it is there, but I don't think it's quite as good as the Mafex version. As you could see, that was the brown suit Wolverine neck peck in the neck, and the Gambit head was modified, dremeled down, and some blue tack added. Let's go out a decent amount, 90 degrees. The knees are double jointed, but there is a bit of an issue with the knees. I've seen on other reviews the issue at the knees described as misaligned parts. Shout out to Kilu Double Hobby YouTube channel. But I'm not sure if my copy has this issue. It might do, as when I articulate the knees they don't fully go back in at times. So again, another constructive criticism regarding this CT Toys Gambit release. Ankle rockers and toe hinge articulation, drop down hips as well, although my right drop down hip works a little better than the left one. I took the coat off to show the articulation, but the coat is really nice and had bendy wire in the seam and collar for some nice dynamic posing, which will really add some character to toy photography or posing CT Toys Gambit on the shelf in the collection. So here is the coat as mentioned, and the bendy wire is a nice touch by CT Toys. Again, that's a nice replication of the Mafex Gambit. So is the articulation good on this CT Toys Gambit? Yes, absolutely. But in my opinion, if you've ever held the Mafex Gambit in hand, you will notice a difference, and the Mafex is obviously the superior figure. But if you haven't ever had the Mafex version, then the CT Toys version is more than worthy as your Gambit in the collection. The only improvements that could be made are the neck joint, the Abbey crunch, and the knee joint articulation. But this is a £20 bootleg of an £80 Mafex figure, so we can't be too hard on CT Toys. In my opinion, the previous CT Toys Wolverine figures did do the job of copying their Mafex counterparts' articulation a bit better though. So for articulation, I'm going to give CT Toys a decent 7 out of 10. Okay, so we have looked at CT Toys Gambit's articulation. Now let's have a look at the accessories that he comes with. And some of the accessories require use of Gambit's hands. So the articulation kind of leads into this. You'll see what I mean. So to start with, CT Toys Gambit comes with 2 large charged throwing cards effects. And these can be plugged into his hands, using the hands with the clear plastic nubs attached, which peg into the effects. This is exactly the same as the Mafex version. Obviously, the plastic of the CT Toys version does feel a butt different to the Mafex plastic on the accessories. And here's where CT Toys get some bonus points over Mafex. The Mafex wrist joint or pegs are not as stiff as the CT Toys ones, and this makes the CT Toys ones stronger, so CT Gambit can hold these larger effects without the use of the stand much better than the Mafex version, where the weight of these larger card-charging throwing effect pieces would weigh down on the Mafex Gambit hands and wrists and flop around due to the weight without the use of the stand. For me, that's a win for CT Toys. As I mentioned, I don't like the use of clear stands. Even if we got a stand that was pink and simulated Gambit, charging something from the ground, that the card-throwing effects could rest on, I'd prefer that. There's an idea for you action figure companies, 10% profits please. And we saw all the different hand and the alternate head option at the start of the video in the clamshell. But here they are loose. So the staff holding hand was just shown. Again, with the CT Toys Gambit staff holding hands, you will need to heat them up for him to hold the staff. From what I can remember, the Mafex one, the staff did just go straight into the hands, but to avoid any paint rub, it is always best to heat them up a bit. And then various hand options, fists and card holding hands. One thing I will say, Mafex has better card holding hands. They tend to fall out of the CT Toys hands a bit easier. So if you want jazz hands or stop don't shoot hands as expressions on Gambit, there are display options for that. So CT Toys Gambit is good with his hands. Rogue will be pleased or maybe not, as she is always trying to stop him getting physically close to her and accidentally absorbing his powers. But if you're enjoying this review as much as Rogue in the comments below, let me know. And also charge that like button. Watch it go boom. Leave any questions. Thoughts or opinions down below? I read and reply to them all, and feel free to become a channel member of You Like for even more content at your fingertips. And so, let's do some more comparisons. And here's Marvel Legends Doctor Strange next to CT Toys Gambit. So as you can see, CT Toys Gambit scales really well with Marvel Legends. And we will soon have a nice Marvel Legends Marvel vs Capcom Gargantos or Shumagorath, which Doctor Strange can fight. And you can have him team up with CT Toys Gambit if you like. And of course, Gambit was a playable character in X-Men vs Street Fighter. So maybe if the Marvel vs Capcom program does well, and I'm sure that it will. Maybe things like that will come in the future. So that's what CT Toys looks like with Marvel Legends. And speaking of Marvel Legends, for all the latest Marvel Legends news and reviews, check out Dan Who Reviews and all these excellent YouTubers and UK independent action figure retailers. Now, of course, you can't get CT Toys Gambit at any of these places, only on AliExpress. And I'll leave a link to AliExpress official CT Toys store in the comments. Shout out to Action Display YouTube channel. And of course it's the month of June, and Dan, who has a G.I. Joe classified based live stream on his channel called Joe's and Juice. And I've been doing YouTube shorts every day so far, looking at characters I'd like to see in G.I. Joe classified form. So far I have Ace, Action Man, Agent Faces and Airtight. I'll leave a link to all those YouTube shorts in the comments below. And of course Jubilee from the X-Men was turned into a vampire. And as far as I'm aware, Gambit never became a vampire. But here is CT Toys Gambit next to the Prince of Darkness himself, Vlad the Impaler Dracula. And big shout out to Adam Batman Moran, one of my channel members. He gifted this to me. Very generous and much appreciated, and it's a lovely figure. So there is of course a Marvel Legends version of Gambit, but that figure could definitively benefit from a soft goods coat with why I have some dynamic posing like the CT Toys one and Mafex one. So I think if I had to rate choices for Gambit, I'd say any of the Marvel Legends ones in third place, second CT Toys Gambit, and first Mafex Gambit, which is a banger. And still one of the best Mafex releases around. And here is the channel mascot getting in on the comparison action. So this is my Kit Bash Big Boa. I do of course have one on the display. But here is my second one with the G.I. Joe Classified Breaker helmet. Valaverse Sergeant Slaughter Wave 2 jacket. G.I. Joe Classified Duke, Wave, one chest strap, and guns from G.I. Joe Classified Baroness with the bike. And the first G.I. Joe Classified Gung Ho if you want to make your own Kit Bash, following that recipe. Shout out to Miss Cloud Foxwell. I know she's a big Boa fan. Good taste. I love all the eccentric Cobra troops and the Joe ones too. And there are some Joe ones, and you can check out my daily YouTube shorts over June, where I showcase a G.I. Joe character I would like to see in classified form. So far I have Ace, Action Man, Agent Faces and Airtight and Airwave. Plenty more to come. And I've just scratched the surface. Anyway, here is my channel mascot, Big Boa Kit Bash with CT Toys Gambit. And Big Boa and Gambit fell over. I'm sure this shit doesn't happen to just Jay Hernandez. Well, ever the professional, I kept going. And here is CT Toys next to a Mafex figure, the Nightfall Jean Paul Valley Batman. One of my favourite Batman looks from the 90s, and of course one of the upcoming CT Toys releases is Hush Batman. I will be a bit more careful with that one out of the box, following on from this CT Toys Gambit. But good to see Mafex and CT Toys in a size comparison. And keeping it with DC, here's a look at the Mattel DC Multiverse Green Lantern Kyle Rayner. From the 90s, it will be interesting to see what Mattel does with the DC license now they have acquired it again. And the Green Lanterns are the police force of the spaceways, and perhaps even space police need bounty hunters. And let's compare CT Toys Gambit to Star Wars Black Series Boba Fett. And of course, in the Age of Apocalypse, Gambit and the Externals went into space to look for the M'Kraan crystal, and we have a Marvel Legends Age of Apocalypse Gambit, and Mafex are doing Age of Apolka Pies comic figures. Could we see some CT versions down the line? A CT Toys Age of Apocalypse Gambit. But until then, what Mafex figures would you like to see from CT Toys? Daredevil and Nightwing are two that the fans are asking for. I'd personally like the comic Captain America, as I missed the boat on that figure. Perhaps Boba Fett can do some bounty hunting and bring that figure in hot or cold for me. And then let's go from a galaxy far, far away to Eternia with Roboto. Now here's how a Masters of the Universe Masterverse figure stacks up against CT Toys Gambit. And Masterverse figures do come in at 7 inches tall, so there will be a height difference. Most Masters of the Universe characters are monsters, barbarians, and more so that's fine standing next to a Cajun mutant from Earth. And we are getting a new Eternia Roboto. I want a Masterverse new Eternia Rio Blast. I'm sure one is coming at some point. And Masters of the Universe has had a mashup with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the Origins scale, and that segues beautifully into our next height comparison. The Super 7 Ultimates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Have you got any Masters of the Universe Masterverse or Super 7 Ultimates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in your collection? Let me know in the comments below. Here's Raphael from Super 7 Ultimates TMNT next to CT Toys Gambit. And of course the Turtles were said to be inspired by Marvel's Daredevil. If we do get a CT Toys Daredevil, I'll have to get him and do a comparison with these guys. I'd actually really be interested to see the X-Men team up. With the Turtles, Gambit and Wolverine in particular would be interesting to see work with them. Or Forge and Donatello could get together and build stuff. Or Beast and Donatello could do some lab work together. And the possibilities are endless. A Professor X and Splinter Zen bonding session would be good. The more I think about this, the more I want a TMNT and X-Men crossover to happen. And then to close out the comparisons, my favourite G.I. Joe classified Joe action figure so far, Starduster. I have no childhood attachment to this guy, I just love the jetpack jump trooper with his cool helmet. And the teals and blues in the uniform really work for me. He's just a great looking action figure on the retro card Duke body mold. And like I say, I'm currently doing daily YouTube shorts on G.I. Joe characters I'd like to see in classified. If you're watching this video on the 5th of June, it's Airwave. And if you're watching it afterwards in June, it's someone else. So I'm tempted to make Starduster another channel mascot. Should I start a tack pack like Dan Who's Who crew? Shoot out to Dan Who for the Who crew and Big Will for the tack pack idea. So yes, I think you'll see Starduster in more reviews, so that's all the comparisons. So let's have some closing thoughts on CT Toys Gambit. So as you can see here, CT Toys can hold the throwing cards effects really well without the need for the stand, and in my opinion better than the Mafex one. Basically, there's some things the CT Toys Gambit does well, and other things the Mafex Gambit does better. The Mafex Gambit heads are much easier to swap out, and the plastic of the figure, hands and accessories does feel more high-end on the Mafex Gambit. But this is understandable as it's an £80 or $80 figure. CT Toys Gambit has better wrist joint strength, as the joints are stiffer and tighter than Mafex. The articulation is about the same apart from less AB crunch and knee articulation issues with the CT Toys copy. So would I recommend picking CT Toys Gambit up? Absolutely, without question. It's a really good figure. I think it's a CT Toys release that will suit a collector that has never had the Mafex Gambit or never held it. It's CT Toys Gambit better than a Marvel Legends Gambit, as they are around the same price point. Yes, absolutely, but as I've mentioned, be careful when first swapping the heads. I think minus the tight neck peg, limited ab crunch and knee joints that may not articulate as fully as the Mafex Gambit, this figure would be a high recommendation. As is, it's really good, but it does have some flaws. I have a feeling CT wanted to get this Gambit out to market quickly and perhaps may have rushed. And they could have taken a bit longer and given us an even more solid release. But at the end of the day, it's a bootleg, which is about the price of a Marvel legend. Has close to Mafex articulation and quality. And even Mafex figures suffer from QC issues from time to time. So overall, I do recommend picking CT Toys Gambit up. And to be fair to CT Toys, they are really good at listening to their customer base and customer feedback. They changed the packaging of all releases due to customer feedback. And I'm sure if more collectors have some of these issues with Gambit, they will make a 2.0 version or something like that, which will be even better. So it's time for a score, and Luffy and myself give CT Toys Gambit 7 out of 10. Previous CT Toys releases, such as Wolverine, have been stronger in my opinion. But this a decent figure. And CT Toys will only get better at making these tribute bootleg figures. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this review. Feel free to write. I've been waiting a long time for this one, chere. In the comments below, old Gambit gonna see who wants to have some fun. I definitely recommend Gambit. Let me know if you decide to pick one up based on this review or any that you have seen online. And until next time, mon ami, enjoy those flicks and figs. You come back soon. Now you hear. Old Taktak Toys, he be waiting to greet you with open arms.